one thing I've noticed, not just within the RV Queens, but talking to all travelers, as you kind of do at the campground, right? Get chatty with folks, is I've noticed a really common theme of trauma. This history of trauma, and that can be physical, emotional, all different types of trauma. And that travel and this nomadic lifestyle is really therapeutic to them and helpful in kind of processing that trauma.
Welcome back to the RV Queens podcast, where we dive into the lives of women making money and living life on the road. Today, we're sitting down with Rachel Lathrop, a full-time RVer, mom, college administrator, and content creator who's juggling a full plate while traveling the country with her family. Rachel's journey from a traditional 9-to-5 grind in Michigan to a remote lifestyle on the road is inspiring. But what's even more fascinating is how she balances a PhD program, a full-time job, homeschooling, and a budding content creation business, all while living in a tiny home on wheels. In this episode, Rachel opens up about their decision to hit the road, how they manage life with neurodivergence, and how she found her creative spark in UGC. Plus, she shares practical tips for thriving with ADHD while juggling a busy life on the move. If you've ever wondered how to balance work, family, and personal passions on the road, this episode is packed with relatable insights and inspiration. So grab your coffee and let's roll. Hello, Rachel, and welcome to the RV Queens podcast. Where in the world are you this week?
Hi, Kate. Thanks for having me. We are in East Texas right now.
Okay. How is the winter weather in East Texas?
Last week it rained and was like in the 50s all week, so that was not fun. But now it's been in the 70s the last few days and looking towards 80 this weekend and sunny, so I can't complain.
Okay, nice. That's kind of like how Florida is. It's like mostly wonderful and you can go for walks and such and swim occasionally. And then sometimes it's like rainy, but still, I'll take it over the Midwest winters. And I know you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Better than the Midwest for sure. When we feel sad about the weather, we look at what it is back home and feel better.
Exactly. You're like, awesome. It's not 30 and depressing. Okay, great. You know where I'm going to start this interview. We're going back before you and your family started living in an RV. What led up to you and your husband shaking up your traditional Michigander life and becoming full-time RVers?
I think like a lot of people you've talked to on the podcast and a lot of RVers, our journey starts, just before COVID. COVID changed everything for a lot of us. So before COVID, we kind of were that typical family where, we'd both go off to work. Our kids would be at daycare or at school. We only saw them a few hours a day. I would wake up in the morning, I'd get them off to daycare and school, and then I'd work my 9-hour day. I had an hour commute each way. So I would go do that. By the time I got home, my husband, who worked 5 to 2, would have already picked them up, made them dinner. And so I get home, everybody else has already eaten. And I sit down to the kitchen table to eat dinner by myself. And when you have little kids, they go to bed pretty early. So I would only have 2 hours a day to spend with them, in the afternoon, 3 hours in the day total if you count the morning. And then they'd be off to bed. And it was like rinse and repeat every weekday. And then when you'd shift to the weekends, all those things you didn't have time to do during the week, you do on the weekends, the laundry, the groceries, the yard maintenance, which was never ending. And you'd have like one day a week as a family. And that was our life. It feels like we lived the same week every week for 8 years. And then COVID hit. And I was sent home. The kids were sent home, which was wild, but it ended up being wonderful. My husband had to work through the whole COVID period. He never really got sent home because he works in the construction, worked for a construction company, supplier of building and lumber materials and all those kinds of things. And so he had to continue to work, but we still got to see him a lot more in the afternoon, So finally during COVID, even though I was working, and we did hire someone to come in and help the kids with school part-time because that was really rough on them. but I got to have lunch with my kids. I got to have recess with my kids. I got to see my husband at 2 instead of 7 and just ask him about his day. We just had so much more time as a family. And this is when we started hiking on the weekends and after work and school. And like when I shut the computer off for work, I was home already. I didn't have to sit in the car for an hour. And a lot of people struggled during COVID, but we really thrived in the slowdown. And, then you fast forward a year, kids are back in school, and my husband had a knee injury and he had surgery. And after the surgery, he needed to be off for 3 months. And when he went back to work, he would come home every day. And this was, by this time, early 2022. He's like, I can't keep doing this. This job is meaningless. They don't value me. I want to be home where I feel like I'm valued and where there's meaning in what I'm doing. And that coincided with me also receiving a promotion. And my department went remote permanently around the same time. And just like a lot of full-timers, we've been watching those YouTubers travel in the country with their kids. And I'll never forget, it was May of 2022. We were watching Keep Your Daydream. Hey, Trish and Mark. And I just looked at him and I said, could we do that? And he looked at me like I had two heads because I'm kind of bougie. Like I like a bed, I like a toilet, but he's like, yeah, I think we could. Let's work the numbers and figure it out. And we hit the road 7 months later.
That is awesome. Okay. You're considering yourself bougie because you like a bed and a bathroom.
Okay. Great. My husband is a hardcore tent camper before this.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Go ahead.
So to him, I'm bougie because he grew up in a family of campers. Like you tent camp with 5 kids. It's normal. And I did not grow up with that same environment. So
Yes. Well, that's what I was about to say. It's funny that you mentioned that because in this lifestyle, you do meet a lot of people that are way more hardcore than we are. Yeah. The kind of like normal Americans are like, well, you live in an RV, so like that's a lot. That's a very small space, all these things. And then you get like this even more narrow strip of humans that are like the overlanders and I mean, even the van lifers and the tent campers. And it's just amazing. Like I totally agree. I feel pretty good about myself for having a king size bed.
Absolutely. Well, and you're not on vacation in this lifestyle. You're living your life, right? And it would be hard to live your life in that way all the time. I know some people do it and they're incredible, but, like connectivity, internet, we can't pay for our life without it. So, but yeah, his whole family had camped for years and years and years. And so he's familiar with towing. He was familiar with the tanks. We had owned 2 rigs ourselves prior to this. So we were not, green to a lot of it.
Here's what I really want to dive into. You are an extremely high achieving woman. Like, I seriously don't know how you do everything that you do. Tell us all the ways that you are making money on the road.
Well, I'm doing it because I'm hyperactive, Kate. That's one. And I have a lot of support. I have a really supportive partner. My husband doesn't work. So there's a lot of responsibilities that moms have that I don't have, that I give to him and he takes off my plate. But I'm an administrator for a college in Michigan. And so that's like, my 9 to 5. I'm also an adjunct instructor in their social work program. And I'm teaching 2 classes right now for that. I just started content creation in the fall. I would say December I really got started. So very, very new to that. And then I'm also in school. Getting a degree.
Wow. And are you working toward a PhD?
Yes. I hate to say
okay.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like to lead with that because it can be off-putting for some people. It's more about workload than it is about intelligence. There's a lot of, it's a lot of work, but yeah, I don't always like to lead with that sometimes because it can be off-putting. But yeah, I'm getting a PhD in educational leadership.
I didn't know that could be off-putting. I'm fascinated by that now, but
when they hear that, it's that you may be unapproachable or judgmental about schooling or academics and, or highbrow, whatever you want to call it. I've found that sometimes, but I am not that way at all. It's just a choice that I'm making. it's definitely not for everyone. I don't even know if it will help me in my career. It's just something that I want to do. And so, yeah.
Dude, I say power to you. Like, I'm sure you can because you have been imagining this, but like having the initials PhD after your name would feel pretty sick. You gotta admit. I don't care who you are. That would feel good.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that part. I'm not going to lie.
Well, work is over and yeah, you worked your butt off for years and it's worth it. I really want to get into is your content creation journey. And because it has to do with your travel life. And it's like on top of everything else that you have going on, going to school, like you just said, you're teaching 2 classes, you're an administrator. How did you get started in content creation and what does that look like in your daily life?
Actually, you helped me get started. You may not know this.
Oh.
So so I had joined the RV Queens back in March of last year, and I had joined at the time we had the Gold Circle because I needed friends. I wanted to make friends with other RV women. Our first year on the road, we had found it to be very lonely, and we were not often in places around the country where other RV families were in any given month. So we were really felt like we were missing the boat on friends. And so I joined RV Queens to make friends with other RV women, and then we transitioned to the Platinum Circle, and I took a good 9 months of just like listening, making connections, digesting the information, just being like a student, if you will, of what other people do and just listening to the struggles and the successes and the opportunities. And one thing that had been missing in my life because of all this other work that I was doing is a creative outlet. I used to write all the time. I used to paint. I used to do yoga. There's so many things I used to do that are taking a back seat because of work and school. And so you had mentioned, well, have you thought about UGC in one of our circles? And that kind of sparked me to think more about it. I had also been developing a really lovely friendship with Ryan Smith, from Rowing with the Smiths. Hi, Ryan. And obviously she's UGC queen. And so just asking her about it and her friendship and her encouragement, she's like, you're already taking the video and the photos anyway. Your photography is beautiful. You have the organization skills. Like, just try it. And if you don't like it, you don't have to keep doing it. And so, she gave me a lot of the steps that I should take to really start that journey. And I just started kind of slowly getting things going, asking for her help or support or feedback. And in December, I started pitching brands and campgrounds. And it's been wonderful. And I like, for me, it is something I do on the side as a creative outlet that happens to also make money or benefit us by saving money in some way. And so that's what it is for me right now. But I do love the idea that maybe it could grow into something more because you never know what could happen, right?
That's amazing. I didn't realize you kind of had creative endeavors before, your career spun up quite a bit there. For the listeners, can you describe what UGC is if people aren't familiar?
User-generated content and how it manifests in the work that I've done so far, which isn't a ton, only 2 months now, is producing reels or photography for campgrounds or brands that they can then take and use themselves on their platforms, whether it's their website or their social media. I don't have to ever post it on my socials. Oftentimes I do just because I'm new and I kind of want to get our name out there, but I don't have to. And I like that because then the pressure is only on creating it's only the creative artistic part of creating the piece or the product, the deliverable. It's not about being an influencer and having 10,000 followers and needing to influence people in that way. And that's an area of social media I'm not super interested in. If it grows into that one day, great. But the thought of having to worry about followers and that being what I'm selling was not appealing to me. So UGC was much more appealing in that way.
Okay, so you talked about finding paid gigs. How do you make money from this? Is there like a site that you go to, or is it just outreach that you've learned how to do?
Well, I think like most creators, I've started off with trade. And that can lead to paid deals down the road. I've only been having really one conversation with one brand about it, and we're not quite there yet. But I do think if you are starting out and there's a product you're going to purchase anyway, trade is a really good place to start, because then you're saving that 400, 300, whatever dollars, and the same with the campgrounds with hosted stays. But knowing kind of how the creative world works in terms of when I did photography, I don't, that's not my intention to do that forever. I do think there comes a point where your time is worth that plus additional pay. And so being able to ask for that. And pricing is different. It depends who you ask. Every creator I've asked or picked their brain kind of has a different pricing model. But I think you just need to look at what's out there in the industry and look at what others are doing and find a price that is comparable to what you think you're worth, maybe hourly or even per package deal, whatever that would look like. And just don't be afraid to ask. I had another RV queen say to me, you can ask to be paid. And if they say no, you could go down to trade. It doesn't have to be the end of the conversation. So being flexible in that way too is, I think, important. But again, I'm very new to all of this. So
I love it. Okay. So speaking of creating content, on your Instagram account, you talk a lot about being a neurodivergent family. So I'm curious to hear, what does that mean and how does it fit or affect your daily life?
I was saying to another RV queen, I talk to these ladies a lot, as you can tell. I don't know what is so great about us. I don't know what our brand is. I don't feel like there's anything particularly special or noteworthy about us, right? And well, then I realized the fact that we are able to do what we're doing with our neurodivergence and just our family dynamics is kind of a niche in itself. It's kind of a brand in itself. And I never thought about it that way. Just being ourselves and being authentic is your brand. That's our brand, right? So our family, we have, all four of us have ADHD and different types of ADHD as well. And so that kind of manifests itself in a lot of ways. So ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition, and it affects the structure and the functioning of your brain. And it impacts everything from speech to motor coordination, emotion regulation, time management, memory, lots of different things. And so for us, the way we can be productive and successful, both as travelers, but then also working and raising children, is we have a lot of tools to keep us in check, and we've developed a lot of systems. And so using our tools and using our systems, we're able to be successful. But I'm not going to lie, there's a lot of chaos a lot of the time. And I think where kind of the humor for us comes in is we just have to laugh at it, because sometimes it can be so ridiculous that, you can't take yourself too seriously in this situation. You just really can't. And I know a lot of people struggle with ADHD or, autism, Tourette's. These are all forms of neurodivergency, right? All different flavors. And there's differing severities, For us, we are very lucky that we are high functioning in other areas, so it kind of does lessen the difficulty. But the systems and tools we have in place are everything. Without those, we would not be able to do half of what we do.
So you're probably planning out your travels for the rest of the year. And if you're heading out west, I hope that Bryce Canyon is on your must-see list. It's one of our family's favorite national parks. I recommend staying at Bryce Canyon RV Resort, which is a short drive from the park entrance, has incredible views, full hookups, and all the family-friendly amenities you're looking for. Bryce Canyon RV Resort is an Our Journey campground, so you know it's going to be clean and safe. Click the link in the show notes to book now and start your journey with Our Journey. You've talked about your day job and you're working towards your PhD and your UGC gigs, on top of being a mom and holding down domestic life and stuff. So how do you stay organized and on top of all of your projects and tasks that you have going on?
First of all, I wouldn't recommend overloading yourself like I have. I will be done with the degree this year if it kills me. I was just listening to Dora Rankin earlier. There's not a lot of white space happening. There's not a lot of mothership happening, mothership time. So I just want to preface it by saying that. But we have planners, calendars, phone reminders, Visual aids. If you come into our RV, you will see calendars and checklists everywhere. And it looks very type A and kind of, weird, but it's not to be type A. It's because if we don't have these checklists, we will forget medication. We will forget to brush our teeth. There's very typical things that you don't usually have to remind yourself to do, maybe if you're neurotypical, that we need reminders for. Timers are huge. The Pomodoro technique I know is very common. Penny uses it with the RV Queens in their co-working sessions. I use that every single day, almost all day, to keep myself in check. Some days, if I'm having a hyper-focused day and I don't have a lot of meetings, there's not a lot of task switching, maybe I don't need it. But other days where there's a ton of task switching, I need to have those timers and those, visual and auditory reminders to switch tasks. So those are kind of the tools we use. The checklists are huge for the kids because then they can physically check something off, which gives them a little boost, a little accomplishment feeling when you physically check something off. I see you're a big write down the list person. I've seen that on your social. That's huge. Yeah. And then supports. Supports are the other piece. Having people in your lives who, it's hard having 4 neurodivergent people all in the same family because it's hard to regulate your kids if you're having trouble regulating yourself. But at the same time, you can understand exactly what your kid is going through emotionally and relate to them in a way that I wouldn't be able to if I didn't also have the same condition. But we have people in our lives that are really supportive, that understand, when you're having a kind of a more hypermanic day versus a really down day, they get it. If you're in the middle of a conversation and you interrupt them, which is super common with ADHD, you're not doing it to be rude. You're doing it because your brain is jumping forward in the conversation to the next topic. Or even topic switching in the middle of a conversation. It can be very frustrating for other people. And when you have people in your lives that get it and don't take it personally, that means everything. And positive self-talk is huge. So like I said, we're huge on goal setting and we're huge on the checklists and celebrating tiny wins. Hey, we got through this week without a meltdown, or hey, we got through today. Let's, have a celebration of all of the accomplishments, because a lot of people that are neurodivergent have low self-esteem, depression, anxiety, because they don't feel like the world accepts them as they are. And one thing that I wish we were better at that's super important for folks, neurodivergent folks, is taking care of your body, exercise, nutrition, sleep hygiene. We're really good with most of it, but I would say we have trouble, all of us, with disordered eating. And so I would say that's one kind of big area that we struggle with. But we do make sure we get a solid 8 hours if we can. And that exercise is a huge part of our life. So that's really how we juggle all of it.
Wow. Thank you for being so open and vulnerable about that. Yeah. I'm curious, how long did it take you? What does the path look like to understand that's what's going on in your brain and your kids and your husband, and to set this environment where everyone is functioning well together? We're
functioning. Sometimes it's well, sometimes it's not so well, right? Yeah. By trade, I'm a trained mental health professional. I have a master's in social work degree. And even though I use that degree for a different type of work, I am trained in the Diagnostic Statistic Manual for mental health disorders. And so, or conditions. I like to call them conditions, not disorders. And so I, can recognize the signs very easily. I've known that I've struggled with it most of my life, even though at the time I was diagnosed as borderline. They like to diagnose women as anxious and depressed instead of ADHD. There's a lot of women that go undiagnosed with ADHD for a long time because it presents very different. The hyperactivity is in our mind and not in our bodies. So that's a challenge, but I've kind of known what it was all along. And the more I went to school and learned about mental health, I was like, okay, yeah, this is the thing. My sons, so I asked for them to be tested very early on so they could receive accommodations in school and the 504 accommodation plans. And they were diagnosed, I think, in first grade with 2 different types of ADHD. And my husband is technically undiagnosed, but very clearly undiagnosed by someone other than me, I should say, very clearly inattentive ADHD type. And, he was growing up back in the 70s and early 80s, and the tests for that were more like, oh, you need to be in special ed. Let's put you on some Ritalin. That's it. There was no accommodations in school. There were no tools. There wasn't much help. And so he was in a really difficult situation in school where he just thought he was stupid and they treated him like he was stupid. And so he got a really bad taste in his mouth about education. Just because it was so long ago, they didn't really know what we know now. And so now that we're on the road and I'm spending 24/7 with him, I'm like, hey, so there's this thing, let's talk about the thing. And he will tell you hands down, has been ADHD his whole life. That's been his problem all along. And he, ADHD has a fair amount of masking too, of acting like you're not having these troubles so that society will accept you. And he was very successful in his career, and people would probably be shocked to know that he has ADHD. But he has, again, other gifts that kind of make up for that and allow him to mask really successfully. But as you get older, your brain changes too. And so a lot of people don't really realize they have it till they start to get older and have other kind of, memory concerns or what have you. Yeah.
I'm starting to feel like everyone has ADHD.
Well, we live in a society that is very difficult to attend to one thing at a time because of everything,
that's what I was
right?
Thinking.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Phones alone, I'm like, I feel like my brain's like, boing, 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 boing.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
I do want to switch topics just slightly, but it's still kind of on this theme because I know you're a deep thinker. You mentioned you've been in RV Queens circles for months and months. Thank you, by the way, for being such a fun part of the group. I've really loved getting to know you more. But so because I know you like to think deep about things, I'm curious to hear what commonalities have you noticed among your fellow RV women and as travelers and women making money on the road?
Wow. Well, a lot of similarities. I think resiliency is a huge one. And I'm speaking specifically about the RV queens and other women, particularly moms that I've met on the road, although not just moms, because we do have a lot of women that are not moms or not moms to young children. But resiliency and kind of this need to have something for themselves, right? This whether it's an outlet or a thing that they can kind of own that is separate from their mom and wife or partner responsibilities and daily life, and finding a lot of kind of comfort and travel in that way. Maybe separation too from what was going on back home. One thing I've noticed, not just within the RV queens, but talking to all travelers, as you kind of do at the campground, right? Get chatty with folks, is I've noticed a really common theme of trauma amongst travelers. And this is all different types of trauma. And, people get really open around the campfire and you kind of get to know folks really quickly and deeply and intimately. This history of trauma, and that can be physical, emotional, all different types of trauma. And that travel and this nomadic lifestyle is really therapeutic to them and helpful in kind of processing that trauma. Going back to my training, it makes sense because traumatic events, one event may be traumatic for one person and not at all traumatic for another person. So there's a lot of individuality there. But trauma originates when we don't feel like we have control over this massive thing that happens to us, right? Or we perceive it that way. And when you're traveling, you have a lot more control over a lot of things. You don't like a campground? Leave. The weather's going to be bad? Leave. Your winter plans aren't shaping up? Then you find other ones. There's a lot of pivot and decision fatigue. But you also have so much more freedom when you're not locationally dependent. And I think that's part of it in terms of the therapeutic aspect, but also getting out in nature and seeing things that are bigger than yourself, getting yourself out of your head and maybe out of habits or environments that weren't healthy. That's just kind of a common thing that I've noticed, a theme that I've noticed across a lot of the conversations we've had.
Wow, that is so fascinating to hear you articulate it like that, because I also wonder if it's just that everyone's more willing to be vulnerable about what's gone on in their lives and in their past and to share about it with their fellow travelers, because I was just thinking, even if we would go back to our normal, more traditional life, living in the suburbs in Omaha, Nebraska, And if we would have people over to a fire and be like, you guys, we're not going out to eat at a fancy dinner. Everyone just wear sweatpants and we're just going to have a night around the fire together. Like those stories I feel like would start coming out then too. Because you're in this setting where everyone's just more free to like let down their hair all the time. Like we're literally living in campers. Like there's no room to be pretentious. There's no room to like have any kind of veneer because we're living in campgrounds,
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends who you have around the fire and how safe you feel with those people, right?
That makes sense.
And I think the campground environment, so using your example, like we're in Michigan a lot of the time for my work. We have to be. So, but even when we're in Michigan, we do take opportunities to go to like a campground that's a couple hours away or maybe across the state. And so we can still be close to work, but also, have that camping experience. And yes, I would say people are more relaxed in that environment because a lot of people feel like they're on vacation or it just kind of sets the tone. You're out in nature, to be more relaxed and more vulnerable. But I would say some of it with travelers, it may also be that you're not going to see these people at work every day, right? When you go back on Monday. And so, if you're not going to see someone, you need to like figure out if you click with someone pretty quickly when you're on the road, because you're likely not going to see them again. And are you going to take the effort to drive 3 states to camp with them again, right? That's a big decision. And so I think that's part of it too, is just cutting through the crap and saying, hey, do we get along? Do we vibe? And if we don't, that's okay. And some of that is being very vulnerable about your past because it influences who you are.
So if there are people listening to this episode who are living a more traditional life, working their 9-to-5 job, living in a house, all these things, doing the daily commute that me and you both did our best to get away from, right? And they're trying to figure out how to live a life of travel. What advice would you give them?
Have conversations. You can ask for things like maybe some remote options, even if you are at a 9-to-5 button seat job. Ask for flexibility. The worst they can say is no, right? Take opportunities when you do have vacations or time off to travel to places you don't typically explore. Get out there. And I would say really the biggest thing for us was realizing that what your life looks like today doesn't have to be what your life looks like in a year. I mean, we completely changed our life in 7 months because we decided to, and granted, I was already in a remote position and it just had a promotion. If either of those things weren't the case, we wouldn't be traveling as much as we do now. But developing skills and investing in yourself so that you can maybe find work that is more in tune with what you want out of life, if that is travel. Just believe in yourself, believe that you can change your life. And if you want travel to be a big part of it, you got to make it happen in whatever way that looks like for you. Whether it's in the summer when the kids are off school or those couple of weeks you have vacation, just don't be afraid to stretch yourself and to kind of think of what's possible. A lot of people on the road are very creative with how they make money. And if every family you talk to, their story is going to be very different about how they support themselves. And that's really encouraging because that means there's a lot of options out there.
Girl, you are so articulate. I'm so glad I invited you on the podcast. I just want to keep going for hours because I feel like you have a lot to offer. Okay. I want you, before I ask my last couple questions here, to go ahead and share with everyone where they can connect with you online.
We're only on Instagram right now. We hope to branch out to Facebook, but we are at Outside the Box Travel, and there's a period between each of those words on Instagram.
And I know you just hit over 1,000 followers, so congratulations. Yes. I know that's a milestone. I remember when it was like a year or two ago when we hit that number, and I was like, whoa! And that just feels like it kind of snowballs, so
yeah.
Hooray. High five.
Thank you. Thanks, Kate.
Okay, so this season, I've been ending my interviews with a couple rounds of one-on-one questions where I ask a question and then we each answer it. So, and it just whatever answer comes to the top of your head. You don't have to think too hard about it or anything if you don't want to. So my first question today is about coffee because I know you're a big coffee lover and so am I.
Yes.
So what is in your favorite cup of coffee?
Vanilla cold brew with sweet foam.
Ooh, okay. Is this like Starbucks specific?
I mean, Starbucks is okay, but I really like kind of the local coffee shops, the smaller. That's where I've had the best tasting coffee, honestly. Yeah. I do like Dutch Bros a lot, though. I'm not going to lie. And I can't get it back home. So when I can get it, I get a lot of it, probably too much of it.
Okay. So my answer to this question is we've gotten bougie at our in-home coffee situation. We used to be pour over people, and then we got a French press. And so we start the day with a French press coffee with Four Sigmatic, like cacao creamer or something with some adaptogens in there. And we have honey. And then we have, right now we're really into the Chobani creamers. I think that's all. And we got the little frother, and man, it's so good every morning.
That sounds great.
Wakes me up. Yeah, big time. Yeah. I didn't used to be that bougie. It takes like 25 minutes to make a cup of coffee, but it's worth it.
But like a huge motivation to get out of bed, right? Like if you know you're going to have something delicious. Yeah.
Fine, I'll get out of bed. I can, as long as I can just like make that coffee right away. It'll make me feel good. Good stuff. All right. Last question is, what is a place that you visited in 2024 that absolutely took your breath away and just gave you a sense of awe?
So one that I've been to before is the Florida Keys. The Florida Keys, being near water that looks like that is just, if I could live there, I would in a heartbeat. I don't like all the storms, obviously, that hit that area, but I would say if you get the opportunity to go to Florida Keys, I mean, it's the closest thing to the Bahamas you can get in the United States. It's gorgeous. It's relaxing. I cry literal tears every time we need to leave. And then and then a place we had, it was also a place that was really kind of, my dad had taken me there and we had a really great vacation together. My dad has passed. And so it reminds me of him a lot. So it's kind of like, I feel like part of my heart's down there. But then a place we'd never been to before, that we just visited in the fall was, Maine. We'd never been to the state of Maine, and Acadia National Park is probably one of our favorite now. And just the whole feeling of that state, it reminds us a lot of northern Michigan, but like with a coast, like a ocean coastline as well. So I would say those two places for 2024. The year prior, we went out west more. So there's a lot there, of course.
Man, so many people have said that about Maine. We haven't been there yet, but I'm like itching to get there. So that's good stuff. My answer to this question is Mount Rainier. Did you guys go there when you went out west?
No, we've never been to Washington yet. Yeah.
Okay. It's like, you see the mountain from afar for like a long time and you're like, whoa, that thing's huge. And then, I mean, I can't even describe the feeling when you it's like I think it's like a 45-minute drive up to the kind of like main place with the lodges and, the national park, all the buildings and stuff are at the top. And we got so lucky this past summer. It was a beautiful sunny day, like 75 degrees, perfect weather. And it felt like we were in a different country. Like I felt like I was in Switzerland, and I'm not kidding. Like it was insanely huge and beautiful. And oh my gosh, I can't even describe that feeling. It's so good. And it's kind of like out of the way. Like if you're staying around Seattle area, it's probably going to be like a little bit of a trek for you to like actually go up the mountain. If it's, might take a couple days to do that whole trip with your family, but it is so worth it. So
that sounds beautiful. That sounds wonderful. We need to get out there.
All righty, Rachel, that is a wrap for today. Thank you so much for inspiring us all, for being on the show. I have loved this conversation. I wish we had another hour, and I'm not kidding because there's so many things I want to pick your brain about, but that's all for today.
Thank you for having me, Kate. I've enjoyed it as well.
You are welcome. All righty, I will see you on the road.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode and for being part of the RV Queens community. Remember to hit subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. And guess what? You can have conversations like I had on this episode with your fellow RV women who are living intentionally and making money on the road. Head to rvqueenspodcast.com/community to join RV Queen Circles today. It's a totally unique online space with a shared prosperity model that's all about community over competition. I'd love to have you be a part. All right, guys, I'll see you next week, or hopefully I will see you on the road.
I'm starting to feel like everyone has ADHD.